Chapter 1: The Great Collapse. In the annals that arose centuries after the Dark Ages, the age that heralded the dawn of the Third Age is known as the Great Collapse. It was no sudden calamity, no single day of wrath or ruin, but a long, inexorable unraveling, in which the very foundations of the old world devoured themselves. It began in silence, within cities that once deemed themselves eternal. The marvels of human craft, once a source of pride, became burdens. Systems fashioned to uphold order dissolved into chaos. The networks that bound all things grew weak with dependence. Men and women forgot the meaning of the devices they commanded. The machines obeyed still, yet none knew why. Power wandered blind, and knowledge became but a shadow of its former glory. Then came the upheavals. Chronicles speak of storms that swept across continents, rivers that forsook their courses, and harvests that rotted in a single day. Plagues born of the old world's excess spread like fire through dry grass. Cities fell silent, streets vanished beneath dust and root. Not by war nor at the hand of foes, but through the slow decay of all that had been taken for granted. Order did not break in a single moment, but in countless quiet deaths. Trade ceased, tongues fractured, communities unraveled. Those who endured survived only because they remembered how to find sustenance, gather water and shield fire. Humanity became small once more, and in its smallness lay its salvation. Through generations, forgetting became law. Knowledge that once bore entire civilizations faded into legend. Legend became myth. Ancient machines, corroded by time and wind, stood as silent idols in crumbling halls. Their meaning was lost, yet their sight impressed upon the survivors a single truth: that power is not eternal, and progress shields no one. The elders of that age, chroniclers without writing, spoke of the time fire, an epoch in which all that existed burned from within, not from malice, but from exhaustion. The world of the ancients had grown too vast, too clamorous, too ravenous. It had forgotten measure, rhythm, and balance. Centuries of silence followed. Whole generations lived without script, without machines, without cities. They hunted, gathered, prayed, and told their stories. Their words changed, their songs grew shorter, their world became smaller, yet in this retreat, humanity endured. The Great Collapse did not end with salvation, but in stillness. Only when the earth had healed, when forests devoured the old roads and rivers carved new paths, did something new arise. From ruins grew hamlets, from hamlets villages, from villages towns, and from towns cities once more. When the first chroniclers of the Third Age were born, they encountered the remnants of the old world: rusted towers, melted foundations, fragments of metal, glass, and stone, and they named them. Not in reverence, but to remember. Thus began the Third Age, not with triumph but with humility. The Great Collapse was not the end of humankind, but the end of its unawareness. From the Chronicles of the Third Age, written in the year 6123 after the Great Collapse, it is said, "When knowledge died, memory remained. When memory faded, breathing remained. And when even breathing grew heavy, life remained. For nothing perishes that breathes in harmony with the earth." Chapter 2: The Age of Silence. After the Great Collapse, an era emerged that would later be known only as the Age of Silence. It was not defined by war or the pursuit of power, but by an almost absolute stillness, by the slow passage of generations in which humanity lived, scattered across the land like grains of sand. Small settlements arose in sheltered valleys along rivers, on hills and plateaus, often so hidden that the remnants of the old world appeared only as distant, ghostly memories shimmering on the horizon. The architecture of this age was organic. Houses were made of wood, clay, and stone, roofs were covered with moss and lichen, and paths followed the natural lines of the terrain. No place was built for its own sake. Everything existed for observation, safety, the use of resources, and adaptation to the environment. Every structure, every camp, every hearth was an expression of necessity, of the will to live in harmony with the earth. People learned to respect nature as their teacher. Wind, water, clouds, the movement of animals, and the cycles of plants were not merely observed but interpreted. A flock of birds could foretell a change in weather. Mist rising from valleys signaled approaching storms, and the behavior of wild animals revealed danger or abundance. Every observation was passed on, first orally, then through symbols and early signs, the precursors of the later air script. During this time, deeply rooted social structures emerged, based on cooperation and mutual dependence. Without a central authority, every action was part of a complex network. Food had to be shared, water sources protected, fires guarded collectively. Conflicts were resolved through mediation, ritual, or simple experience, not by violence. Those who were careless or ignored the laws of nature paid the price immediately. Those who learned patience, observation, and deliberate action survived. The silence was not only external but internal. People spent long hours in reflection, meditation, or quiet labor. Songs, stories, and legends preserved knowledge and memory. Every ritual, every passage from one generation to the next was inspired by nature. The planting of trees in spring, the harvest in autumn, the watching of animal migrations in summer. Chronicles from later ages tell of children who grew up studying the movement of rivers or the patterns of stars without ever being formally taught, an education born directly from the world around them. The environment itself shaped the human spirit. Years of drought brought communities together in mutual aid. Floods taught respect for waterways. Sudden storms demanded adaptation and swift response. These trials produced not only survival skills, but philosophical reflection, the realization that every action carries consequences, that impatience and haste destroy, and that life itself is an ongoing dialogue between humanity and nature. The Age of Silence also gave birth to the first seeds of science: precise observation, systematic recording of plants, animal behavior, weather cycles, and seasons. These records, at first in symbols and oral traditions, laid the foundation for the return of writing and the later rise of cities. Yet the silence was marked by solitude. Individual settlements were often isolated for months or years at a time. People had to learn inner strength, to master their fears, and to find wisdom in small, everyday choices. This inner discipline, coupled with outward attentiveness, forged generations both physically adaptable and mentally alert, a kind of humanity unknowingly preparing itself for the ages to come. The Age of Silence did not end abruptly. It faded slowly as the first signs of returning literacy and organized knowledge began to appear. But it left deep traces, an understanding of harmony, patience, and responsibility that would shape all subsequent eras. This epoch taught that survival depends not on strength or power alone, but on the ability to read the signs of the world, to understand them, and to act in accordance with them. Later chronicles would call this age the Silence. Yet in truth it was full of life, of observation, of quiet trials. Every river, every forest, every mountain was both teacher and judge, and every human act a response to the ancient silent conversation with the earth. Chapter 3. The Return of Writing. Centuries after the time of silence, a new age began, the age of writing. Not abruptly, not as a sudden invention, but as a quiet, gradual return of symbols, signs, and sounds that allowed humankind to preserve observations, experiences, and wisdom. This new form of communication was called air, a system of lines, dots, sound marks, and symbols that could express far more than mere words. Ideas, concepts, observations of nature, instructions, and the subtlest nuances of human experience. At first, air was difficult to grasp, for people had lived by speech alone for generations. But those who had the patience to read the signs of nature soon discovered the power of writing. It was not merely a tool of record-keeping, but a bridge between communities, cities, and generations. Suddenly, knowledge could be shared across vast distances, over valleys, rivers, and mountains that had once kept people isolated. The return of writing transformed human thought profoundly. Observations were recorded systematically. When rivers overflowed, when certain plants bloomed, when animals migrated. Every experience could now be analyzed, repeated, and passed on. Errors became visible, recurring patterns discernible. People learned that knowledge arose not only from experience, but from its precise documentation. With writing came the rebirth of the chronicle, records that not only documented events, but also reflected the philosophy and ethics of a community. Teachers emerged who instructed the younger generations in the art of air, and libraries began to appear, at first humble halls of wood and clay. where symbols were gathered on tablets, stones, and parchments. Yet writing brought not only practical benefits, it changed human consciousness. It taught them that words hold power, that every notation carries responsibility, and that what is recorded may endure for centuries. Thoughts once fleeting could now be communicated across generations. People began to understand that shared and understood knowledge forms the foundation of every stable society. Air was more than a tool. It was a mirror of humanity itself. Complex symbols represented natural laws. Rhythmic signs stood for movement, sequences of tones for emotion. Those who mastered the script began to perceive the world on a higher level. Cities could grow, alliances could be formed, and knowledge became a living web connecting people, places, and time. The return of writing also paved the way for the first mathematical and astronomical studies. Humanity could now observe the heavens systematically, record the cycles of the sun, moon, and stars, and translate the patterns of nature onto paper or stone. Knowledge of medicinal plants, weather phenomena, and animal behavior could for the first time be securely archived so that the mistakes of the past need not be repeated. But the return of writing was not only a technical advance, it was a spiritual and philosophical transformation. People learned that the spoken word is fleeting, while the written word endures through the ages. They began to reflect, to plan, to analyze, and at the same time to maintain humility toward nature. Writing made it possible for the future to be conceived within the present, for decisions to be made with an awareness of their long-term consequences rather than mere immediate necessity. The chronicles tell of early communities that created small tablets of wood or stone, upon which they recorded observations, rules, and stories. These collections grew slowly, became organized, and eventually gave rise to the first libraries, centers of learning, counsel, and remembrance. Writing was the key that allowed humanity to weave past, present, and future together. Ea also taught the responsibility of those who write. Every symbol bore meaning, every record demanded thoughtfulness. Writing was not merely a means, but a duty. Those who misused it sowed chaos. Those who understood and used it with honor laid the foundations for cities, alliances, and the later halls of knowledge. Thus, the return of writing marked not only a practical advance, but a profound intellectual and cultural turning point. It was the first bridge from the silence of a broken world toward ordered communities, cities, alliances, and the systematic collection of knowledge. Without it, the later age of the cities of breath and the halls of knowledge would have been unimaginable.